human design is a lot more similar to astrology because it's actually based on the time, date, location of your birth. And essentially, what it creates is a blueprint, is an energetic blueprint of you. And what that energetic blueprint gives you is different insights into how you are designed to operate in a way that is easeful to you, is enjoyable to you, and is going to allow you to thrive. Thrive as an individual and therefore then thrive in different areas of your life, whether that's work, having a business, relationships, hobbies you might have. So it gives you guidance as to what feels good to you and why, and the challenges that you'll likely face and why. And by giving you those insights, then you're better able to, number one, understand yourself, validate a lot of your experiences, validate a lot of the challenges that you may have faced so far. It also brings attention to the conditioning that you might have collected along the way. And when I talk about conditioning, I'm talking about the stories, the judgments, the limiting beliefs, the shoulds, the musts that we all collect as we move through life from people, family, friends, the media, the world. And so human design gives you a map. It gives you something that you can refer to come back to yourself, to come back to your most authentic self, and therefore be better equipped to face whatever decisions you come up against, or whatever situations you might find yourself in a way that honors who you are, honors your truth, your needs, your desires, and ensures that you remain as aligned to your version of happiness, well-being, and health and success as you possibly can.
Veronica, welcome to the channel. Can you start by sharing a little bit about your background, your journey with human design, and what got you into this line of work?
Yeah, for sure. So my journey began when I was 18 years old. I'd just finished my studies and I was trying to decide whether I wanted to go to university or not. And I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I was a little bit lost, and I came across coaching. I went to a free 2-day coaching event in London with one of my mum's friends, actually. I went to keep her company, and I was there and I fell in love with the whole coaching world. And this was at least 17 years ago now. And at the time, no one really knew what coaching was. No one was familiar with coaching. I think most people in the UK had heard of Tony Robbins, and that was pretty much it. So I ended up studying I did a coaching diploma, an NLP diploma, and then I went on to study psychology at university. When I finished university, I was always coaching as a hobby, and I was coaching on the side. I then started working, and I kind of had in my 20s different corporate roles. I was coaching evenings and weekends. And in 2016, I finally plucked up the courage to go traveling. So I left my corporate career and I went traveling by myself. I went to New Zealand, Australia, and kind of traveled around. Met my now husband whilst I was traveling, and we eventually came back to the UK. And when I did, I really felt like, okay, now is a time where I'm ready to build my coaching practice. However, we had no money because we'd just been traveling for 3 years, for a year. So I ended up in another corporate career. But whilst I was there, I was still coaching and building the practice part-time. And then finally in 2019, that's when I started to build my coaching practice and the business that I now have. So at this point, I had no idea what human design was. I'd never heard of it. So I kind of threw myself into building a business as best I could with what I was being told. I invested heavily in mentors, in coaches myself, business coaches, marketing coaches, one-to-ones, groups, masterminds, courses, the lot. And I was finding that although I was doing a lot of mindset work, and obviously my background is in psychology, something just wasn't clicking. And the way that I was building my business just didn't feel quite right. I've always loved what I do, but I was just finding that I was really struggling to love the way I was doing it, especially when it came to specific areas in my business. It didn't feel like it fit me. I felt like I was trying to mold and twist and change to fit whatever strategies or advice I was being given. And then on a random evening, I was in London at a networking dinner, and someone mentioned the term human design. And I was like, I have no idea what this is, but I'm going to make a mental note to look into it on my way home. So on the train on the way home, I Googled human design, and it was this entire new world that opened up for me. And I was like, wow, okay, this really doesn't make sense to me right now, but I was intrigued. I pulled up my chart and found out I was a projector. And again, it didn't really make any sense to me as to what that meant. And I think that's probably the experience that most people go through. But when I looked into the characteristics of a projector and some of the summary of my overall design, I was mind blown because it was so validating and it really described a lot of the challenges that I have faced my entire life that I couldn't really rationalize. But also it described my strengths and things that it just felt very validating. So from there, I ended up working with a projector mentor in a group setting that was specifically for projectors. And I loved it so much. And I started to see huge changes just because my mind was opening to this whole new world of really being able to do life and whatever that involves, whether that's a career or business or relationships, in a way that actually feels good to you as an individual. And from there, I ended up studying to become a human design reader and specialist. And eventually, I was just aligning my life and my business to my design. But with time, I started to integrate it into the way that I help my clients. So I started to integrate into the coaching business. And now it's almost taken over the coaching business because the more people find out about human design, the more clients I've attracted that are specifically interested in human design. And then my YouTube channel came along and things have kind of evolved from there. So that's kind of gets me up to date to where I am now.
Interesting about human design, it was in January of this year, I met a new friend for coffee. And I come from an HR background and performance coaching, and I was talking about Enneagram numbers and disc profiles. And she said, "Have you ever looked into human design?" And I said, "I've never even heard of it." And I love stuff like this. I'm like, "No." And she was like, "It's not necessarily like Enneagram. It's not like the disc or Myers-Briggs. It's a totally different way of seeing yourself." And so I think that she shared an app with me. I looked at it, I got my chart, and I read a few things that were like, whoa, I feel seen for the
Mm,
first time. But then it just was like all of this different stuff that I'm like this chamber and that thing, and that I was like, my brain just kind of
yeah.
went, okay, no, math. Like it just felt like math to me. So I was like, no. But then it was probably around the summer, so around May or June. I just feel constantly like square peg, round hole, no matter how many experts I listen to, especially when it comes to my channel or marketing materials. And it made me feel like something's wrong with me. And why can I not be consistent? And why can I not show up? But I've had big successes in my life before, whether that is like um, body composition, where I've been able to put a strategy in place, put a plan in place, and then boom, I just did it. But it didn't come by saying, I'm going to lose all this weight and I'm going to build muscle and I'm going to do this thing. It was like, it almost seems like the stars and the moon aligned. And then all of a sudden, it was so easy to flow into this weight loss journey and body composition. And my whole plan was never to lose weight. I would just wanted to feel better. And I
Mm,
wanted to be able to restore some things from my memory because I had worked in like a really hard job in behavioral health, addiction treatment. And I was up all hours of the night and I was working all the time. And I felt like I couldn't remember at dinner time what I had for breakfast. And that was concerning to me. So I was like, what can I do to get my mind right? And that was, well, if you do 30 minutes of cardio 3 times a day or 3 times a week, you can restore some of your cognitive function. So that's how I started. I didn't start with I'm going to change my whole body and be a muscle mama. So So it was in June that or I think it was in June when I started thinking like it was the what is wrong with me, and I had been on my healing journey from erythrophobia for many years, and I call myself healed from erythrophobia, which when I got to the bottom of all of that, I realized like it's really not about blushing. That's just a symptom. It is such a bigger, broader conversation about who am I and why don't I feel safe in the world
Mm.
around me. And why do I think something's wrong with me? And why do I think I don't operate? And why do I listen to experts, but I'm doing what they told me to do and I can't be consistent or I can't get the outcomes that they tell me I'm going to get? And I looked into human design again. It kept coming back to me like, you should maybe
Mm.
explore human design. So I watched a few YouTube videos and I absolutely like clung to it for the life of me. I just felt like these are my people, especially projectors, because I found out I was a projector. And then I came across your videos and I had just been like consuming them, like binge watching them because I'm like, we're the same person. And I think our numbers are different. I'm a 2-4. What are you?
I'm a 2-5.
2-5. So I know those are a little different. Again, I don't know what all that means. For those of you who are listening, I just told Veronica I actually need to do a reading with her and then I'll report
Mhm.
back on like what I learned because I'm kind of piecemealing things together. But so for people who are listening and for or people who or when I talk to somebody and say, have you looked into human design or you should look into human design? What people kind of listen to that and go, oh, yeah, yeah, I'll look into it. And they either do or they don't. But how do you share with others about, what is human design and why is it beneficial to people? So for people who are listening that are like, oh, it's another personality test.
Mm.
It's not really. So can you give a little bit of just what you say to people when they ask, like, what is human design?
Yeah. So that's such a good question because a lot of people are still not aware of human design, let alone understand what it is and how it works. Certainly, no one in my life knew about human design until I discovered human design and started talking about it, especially my husband. He's a pro now. So essentially, and it's interesting that you mentioned the personality test, like the Enneagram, the disc profiling, because I guess in some way, human design is similar in the sense that it gives you insights into how you operate. Where it really differs is that personality tests tend to be focused on your mind and how you think and your personality and um, your way of seeing the world and your way of behaving. Whereas human design is a lot more similar to astrology because it's actually based on the time, date, location of your birth. And essentially, what it creates is a blueprint, is an energetic blueprint of you. And what that energetic blueprint gives you is different insights into how you are designed to operate in a way that is easeful to you, is enjoyable to you, and is going to allow you to thrive. Thrive as an individual and therefore then thrive in different areas of your life, whether that's work, having a business, relationships, hobbies you might have. So it gives you guidance as to what feels good to you and why, and the challenges that you'll likely face and why. And by giving you those insights, then you're better able to, number one, understand yourself, validate a lot of your experiences, validate a lot of the challenges that you may have faced so far. It also brings attention to the conditioning that you might have collected along the way. And when I talk about conditioning, I'm talking about the stories, the judgments, the limiting beliefs, the shoulds, the musts that we all collect as we move through life from people, family, friends, the media, the world. And so human design gives you a map. It gives you something that you can refer to come back to yourself, to come back to your most authentic self, and therefore be better equipped to face whatever decisions you come up against, or whatever situations you might find yourself in a way that honors who you are, honors your truth, your needs, your desires, and ensures that you remain as aligned to your version of happiness, well-being, and health and success as you possibly can.
When you said your husband is a pro now, it made me think about my husband. I made him do it, and he's a generator. And when I learned about generators, I'm like, this makes so much sense. Like this, he is able to just lock in and get it done, and you won't hear him complain or get all over the place. He just goes. Um, when you talk about how you operate or being your most authentic self, living in alignment with your truth, something that I realized on my journey of overcoming erythrophobia is that I was able to really explore when I flush, when I blush, when I'm anxious, just in general, when my nervous system feels really dysregulated. And as
Mm,
I've gotten older and as I've explored that journey, this is why I always say blushing is an invitation. So people who hate blushing and just want to cure it, I always say blushing is an invitation. It is calling you inward. It is taking you on a journey. It has
mm,
been one of the most beautiful journeys of my life because I've met people like you and people from all over the world through this whole experience. But what I've learned in my own exploration of inner work is I tend to flush or get really anxious when I feel like I'm not being authentic, when I feel like I'm not in an environment that I want to be in. I've learned to like understand cues and signals from my body that everybody has to some degree. It might be sweating, it might be shaking, it might be the pit in their stomach. And for
mm,
those from the blushing phoenix community, they turn red or they flush red or they get super sweaty.
mm,
And I've learned through human design, a lot of times for me, it's because I'm in an environment or I'm doing work that
mm,
I don't love. Or I've even learned that um, when you and I were scheduling this meeting, and I think I don't know if you and I actually had this conversation or if I heard you on a video talk about this, but that if you are doing coaching and then you do an interview and then you have another coaching call, that's too much. Like you just know from your own self that is too much. And I know for me, if I've been on a lot of meetings or I've been meeting a lot of people, period, and I feel great and I feel social, I may get towards the end of the day and start flushing. And I
mm.
realize that's my body cueing me, like we're done. Like we're done here. Have you seen in your own experience, or even when you're coaching others, that they have found any sort of like bodily cues or internal, being able to hear that internal trigger, or do they learn it through knowledge of projector or not projector through human design of this is what my body's saying to me? I guess my overall question, I know I'm all over the place because I'm so excited about this, but my overall question, I guess, is through learning about your human design, do people or do you or do I don't know if it's the same for generators or others that find out that their body is actually speaking to them to get them back in alignment with who they are and where they need to be, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and for sure. I think what will be helpful for people listening to understand who maybe aren't familiar with human design is that there are five different energy types in human design. So we've mentioned projector. So you and I both are a projector. You've mentioned a generator, that is your husband. So let me just quickly summarize the different types, and then I will answer your question in relation to how different types maybe relate to their body and how their body might be speaking to them when they are in anti-alignment. So, like I said, there are five different energy types in human design. And by the way, this doesn't mean that human design just puts people all over the world in five different boxes, right? That is very limiting. So, that is not the case. Your energy type essentially just describes the way that you're designed to use, absorb, and share your energy. That is it. It has nothing to do with your personality or with your style, with your character. It gives you insights into how you are designed to move through life and how you do that by sharing your own energy with others and absorbing other people's energy in return. I often compare this to someone might be left-handed, someone might be right-handed. Knowing that doesn't really tell you anything about who they are, but it does tell you that they might find it easier to write and eat with their left hand versus their right hand, or vice versa. Right. So it's just, I want to clarify that because one of the first misconceptions with human design is that people fall into one of five boxes. And in some way that's helpful, but in some way that can feel really limiting. So there are five. There's manifestors, and manifestors are the trailblazers. These are the people who get bursts of energy, they get urges, they want to go and do things. And when they do, when they get this urge, that's it. They're ready. They don't want to be stopped. They don't want anything or anyone getting in their way. They're like a train that's set off and it isn't going to slow down for anyone. So manifestors are really here to, they see a world that doesn't exist yet, and they're here to be innovative, to be trailblazers, to shake things up and move us towards evolution and change and growth. Then we have the generators, and the generators are, as your husband, the generators are the energy type who are really the doers. They are sacred beings. That means that they have access to consistent life force energy, which makes them really energetic. So they actually have the juice to be doing all sorts of different things, and especially if they're engaging in things that they love and that they're passionate about, they can keep going all day long. They can forget to eat, they can forget to pick up the kids, they can be so engrossed in what they do. And when they do that, the reason they're called generators is because the more they engage in hobbies or tasks or things that bring them joy and light them up, the more energy they create. And that energy oozes out of them and influences everyone around them. So we love to be around an aligned generator because they're so energetic and they're so magnetic that it makes everyone feel a little bit more energized and a little bit more ready to go. Then we have manifesting generators, which are a hybrid of the two. And they kind of take qualities from the manifestor and the generator. The manifesting generators are the multi-passionate of the human design world, right? So these are people who have loads of hobbies, loads of interests. They're always multitasking. They really find it hard to focus on one thing for a prolonged period of time because they need a lot of stimulation. They're always, looking for something new and exciting to learn, to do, to try. They're a lot of fun. These are the people that struggle to have pick a niche or to have one job title. They really are designed to be and do as much as they find interesting and get excited by. Then we have projectors like you and I. Projectors are the guides of the human design in the human design world. We don't have a defined cycle, which means that we don't produce our own life force energy. We absorb and amplify everyone else's. This makes us incredible guides. We're really good at seeing people, holding space for them, helping them understand themselves. And what we kind of can struggle with is burnout a lot of the time, because when we try to keep up with the other energetic types, we can sometimes find it difficult to do as much as they do, because projectors are not designed to do, we are designed to see and guide. And then we have reflectors, and reflectors are the rarest type, and there's only around 1% of the population, and they're incredible. I don't know many reflectors, and I would definitely love to know more. Reflectors are very open. They absorb a lot of energy from the people around them. Also, all of their chart is white. So if you ever see it, if you've seen a chart, or if anyone listening is going to go and look up at the chart, a reflector's chart is completely white, which means that they're really energetically sensitive, and they are the mirrors. They are here to reflect back whatever is going on and to make us realize what we might be going through as people or as a collective, and to help us improve ourselves. So each of those energy types has different qualities and different challenges, and they will feel aligned. Even if they didn't know anything about human design, they would feel aligned or out of alignment, depending on whether they are staying true to that way of using their energy or not. When they are not, we call this in human design not self-theme. They will be, I'll say we will be faced with a lot of resistance, and that resistance can show up in loads of different ways. So to answer your question about, what might someone be experiencing if they're not in alignment, that can look different for everyone. But for example, sacred beings, and when I say sacred beings, I'm referring to generators and manifested generators, whoever defined sacral, which is a box in the middle of the chart, if the second up from the bottom, if you're looking at a chart, they will feel it in their gut. They are driven by their gut. These are the people who say things like, "Oh, I just know it in my gut that that's not quite right." They make decisions from the gut. They're very intuitive, and the intuition comes from really their stomach. So often what I find is that when generators or manifesting generators are not in alignment, they have a lot of tummy problems, right? They might struggle with IBS or indigestion or anything related to the stomach, because essentially what they're doing is that they're constantly going against what they are designed to be and who they are designed to be. And that energy, that resistance, then shows up in your body. A lot of projectors have immune problems with their immune system, with burnout, with chronic fatigue. Again, why? Because projectors don't have a defined sacral, and yet they try to keep up and do as much as some of the other energy types. And so they burn out over and over again. And intellectually, we can push ourselves to the limit, but the body doesn't lie, right? The body doesn't lie. So you can mask and hide and pretend that you're okay. And sometimes we're really great at doing that and at just smiling on the outside and saying that we're fine. But the body sooner or later catches up with you. And I think then when we talk about blushing, that's the kind of scenario where you may be able to say that you're okay, but your body is having some sort of reaction, and that reaction is telling you something. And as you said, and for you, it was actually, I feel like I'm not being myself, I'm not being authentic, or I'm not in an environment that allows me to be authentic or allows me to feel safe in my authenticity. So you may have behaved as we do as members of society in a way that you were expected to, but the body was like, no thanks. I don't feel right now. There's a disconnect between what we're doing and what we're feeling on the inside. And in my opinion, that disconnect then comes through as a symptom, whether that's blushing or something else.
Incredible. I think the thing for me too is that, like you said, there's something, the body's not lying. And I've even found that for me, sometimes it's just as simple as I'm tired. I'm ready to go home. I just
Mm,
want to be alone, and that always being in an extroverted, being labeled as an extrovert,
mm,
um, but feeling like I don't want to be around people. It
yeah.
changes. And then learning a little more, just a tad bit about my own human design that I'm like, well, this makes so much sense. There's so much validation in this. When you talk about conditioning and stories from the world, something that I see a lot in this community as well, and that I've experienced from my own journey and where we're shifting now as a community is talking about mindset and limiting beliefs and who told you that? Can you talk a little bit more about with human design conditioning stories that we've been told and how you've seen people learn through human design how to move through those limiting beliefs?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, conditioning is pretty much inevitable, right? Because as we learn, as we grow, we're picking up cues and stories and facts and information, and we build up this knowledge pool of who we are, who other people are, how we're meant to behave, how others behave, what's expected, what's not, what's okay, what isn't. And obviously, everyone's conditioning will be different based on their age, their background, their culture, their family dynamics. There's so many different factors that go into someone's conditioning. So, what I found with human design is that it gets you, it gives you something to come back home to yourself. So that it doesn't really matter what condition you've picked up along the way, what stories, what expectations have been pushed on you, what pressures you have, um, you know, have led you to be who you are today and to behave in the way that you have today. Human design can guide you back to yourself, to who you are at your core. Because sometimes we know what we don't want to do and we know what we don't like and we know who we don't want to be. But a lot of us actually struggle to understand who we are and who we do want to be and what we do want to do. Because again, society often doesn't create an environment that encourages us to think about those things, right? We pretty much fall into the school system, and from there, then into work, and then into relationships, and then into responsibilities and commitments. And before you know it, a lot of us, especially by the time we're adults and we're going down that healing journey and self-reflection and looking back, we're like, how did we end up here? Like, I don't even know how I got here. So human design is actually one of the reason I love it is because it's super specific and it's very actionable. What Before I discovered human design, I wasn't even into astrology. So I feel like there's two ways you can look at human design. You can look at it from quite a spiritual, I guess, woo perspective. Woo is a term that I've heard a lot, an esoteric way, or you can look at it in a very pragmatic, logical, action-oriented way. And I'm somewhere in between. I have a very logical design. I'm a quad left in terms of my arrows, which I know will mean nothing to a lot of people, but just know that I'm very logically minded. So what I love about human design is that it takes something quite esoteric and quite elusive sometimes when we talk about energy, when we talk about how that energy might be affecting us. Sometimes it's hard to measure, right? The standard person going through life and going through their day-to-day responsibilities might struggle with that concept, but human design takes that information and gives you something that you can actually use. So in terms of deconditioning, human design, the first thing it does is that it gives you a point to start. Because sometimes, like, where do I even start from? There's so many things that I might not feel comfortable with, or that I might want to improve or completely change, but I don't really know where to start. And so, human design can give you a starting point. It gives you information of the best way for you as an individual. And again, I mentioned there are 5 energy types. That is the tip of the iceberg of someone's design. There is so much more to it than that. So, for example, you mentioned earlier, sometimes I feel like an introvert, sometimes I feel like an extrovert. That 100% speaks to your 2-4 profile, because profile in human design is something that gives you insight into how you see yourself on the inside, but it also the kind of energy that you project outwards. So your internal number, the number 2, is the hermit, and this is the profile of someone who loves to be by themselves, working on their own things, really getting in, having time and space to do what they want to do and not be disturbed. And this is also the profile of the naturally gifted, of people who just seem to be good at things, but they're not really sure how they're good at them. And they often don't see their talents as talents. So if someone asks a line 2, oh, what are you good at? You'd probably say, I'm not sure, nothing, everything and nothing. So we've got that energy, and then your line 4 is the profile of someone who actually is incredible at bringing people together. So it doesn't surprise me you have a podcast, right? Because the line 4 loves to talk to people, loves to build connections, loves to create meaningful rapport with people. And so it describes that feeling of, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? And you're both, depending on the day and the time and your energy levels. So, and then human design can give you insights into so many different facets of who you are. And from there, it also highlights the conditioning that you might have. Because again, a lot of people who are struggling know that they're struggling, but they don't know why, right? They're aware of the symptoms, but not of the actual cause of those symptoms. They might find themselves procrastinating. They might find themselves self-sabotaging. They might find themselves being really reactive and speaking to others in a way that they're not proud of. They might find themselves making decisions that in the moment feel like a good choice, but then afterwards just leave them with guilt and shame. But often they don't have the knowledge of what is behind those symptoms, those behaviors. So when it comes to human design, what it can do is that it can bring you more awareness of why you might be doing the things that you're doing, and how you can bring yourself out of that non-aligned state and into something that feels really good. And that can happen gradually and step by step. Doesn't happen overnight. So, for example, with the work that I do with clients, we always start off with a human design reading so that we build that awareness of who someone is, how they're designed to be. Most of us are not living our design, we're living our conditioning, right? Because it doesn't feel safe to be ourselves. So we have to build up that trust and that safety. In order to do that, first of all, we need to get clear as, okay, but what does good feel like to me? And what does that look like? And who am I at my core? Who am I underneath the layers and layers and layers of shoulds and musts that I have been suffocating underneath often? And we kind of peel back those layers So the first session is the human design reading to get that information. And then we start to look at, okay, well, if this is who you are at your core, and if this is what feels good to you, then what's the current situation? What is currently stopping you from being that version of yourself? And that's when you start to identify, okay, well, I would love to share my voice more, but I have a fear of being seen. And this is something that projectors have a challenge with a lot, right? Projectors are there to guide, but they need to be invited. And that's called strategy in human design. So each of the energy types has a corresponding strategy. And this is basically a way for you to know how to attract aligned opportunities that feel easeful and really good. And often we're not working with our strategy, we're working against it. And when we do, we create more resistance without even knowing it. So, all of that to say, human design can give you the insights and can give you the starting point, and then it can highlight the conditioning that exists. And then it can give you the tools of how you can slowly but surely start to move away from things that don't feel like a good fit for you and start to move closer to what does. And they call it the human design experiment because it's not a one and done thing, right? It's a process that you go through. But once you start it, it feels so good that you don't want to go back. It's almost like once you've the way an analogy that just came up for me is imagine wearing a tight pair of shoes that are like two sizes too small your whole life. And you walk around with sore feet, but you're not sure why you can't walk or run as fast as everyone else. And one day you take those shoes off and you put on a pair that actually fits. And you're like, wow, I never realized how much I could do just because I was trying to squeeze into a pair of shoes that just didn't fit me, that someone handed me a really long time ago. This is the kind of feeling I get with human design. It gives you a pair, it helps you find a pair of shoes that is perfectly tailored to your feet. That's a really random analogy. I hope it makes sense to whoever's listening. But I am famous with clients for very strange metaphors and analogies, but most of the time they land with certain people.
I think in pictures. So as soon as you start talking about the feet, because it feels experiential to me, immediately
Mm,
I'm like, I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like. Or any other thing in my life where I thought I had the best at something, and or like I had a chiropractor in Tennessee when I lived in Tennessee. He was the best. I didn't want to leave him. Then I moved to South Carolina and found another chiropractor, and I'm like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. Or just so many examples in my life where it would fit that analogy. I think the thing for me with human design was that I felt okay in my body. I felt
mm,
okay. And even just hearing you, this is one of the greatest things about running a podcast is that I get a front row seat to talk to people like you, and even hearing a little bit of a breakdown between, of course, you feel like an introvert and an extrovert sometimes because
mm,
of the 2-4. I've done a little research on that and understood. I'm like, that makes sense when I've read it, but hearing you break it down, or even the things with my gifts are like, so what are you good at? I'm like, I don't know. But
mm,
people around me are constantly telling me what I'm so good at or
mm,
how I know things, but I don't know how I know that. And being in a corporate structure, a lot of times where people are doers. And so when I think about what my days look like, it's not a ton of, there are busier admin doing days, but I know when those are coming and I have like whole calendar blocked off for that. And
mm,
that might look like I did something with my kid earlier that morning, and then I go into my think time. But mostly being able to know how I work, how I schedule my days, how I am in my relationships. And I haven't even done the reading yet. I just did a little bit of research on my own and then tried to like blurt it out to the channel because in some blogs and letting people know like you've got to look into this. So if people are listening and they are like, oh my gosh, I feel like my shoes are too tight,
mm.
I want to learn more and I want to be able to do a reading and they want to have a reading with you. Can you tell a little bit as we're wrapping up here, what they could expect from meeting with you or in the way you do your process of what does that look like if they have a call with you, a reading, coaching, or whatever that looks like?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say if people are interested in human design, they can get a free chart. So that's a good place to start, just to get a free chart and get the information of what they are. And for those listening who are interested in this, the things you want to look out for on a chart, because when you look at a chart, it can be very overwhelming. There's loads of shapes, loads of lines, loads of colors and numbers. The first time I looked at it, I was like, I have no idea what's going on. But you can always ignore all of that and just look for your energy type. So you'll either be, like I said, a manifestor, generator, manifesting generator, projector, or reflector. So you know that. Look for your strategy. So each type has a corresponding strategy. For manifestors is to initiate and inform. For generators is to respond. For manifesting generators is to also respond and inform. For projectors is to wait for the invitation. And for reflectors is to wait for a lunar cycle. And so you want to know your type, your strategy, and your authority. So your authority in human design is the way that you're designed to make decisions. And this is a really interesting one because most of us are told and taught to make decisions using our head and to make decisions from, thinking things through and getting expert advice. But actually, a lot of us have a lot of wisdom that we can tap into to make decisions that feel good to us. So just looking up those three things is really, really important. And you can access a lot of free information specific to those three things. If someone wants a reading, the best thing that they can do is they can go onto my website and look at my Work With Me page. And what happens during the reading is I will prepare your chart ahead of time and we'll get on a Zoom call and we are together roughly for 90 minutes to 2 hours. So it's quite in depth. There's a lot that goes on into a reading. And essentially, what happens is that I explain your chart to you in ways you can understand. So I take all the knowledge that I have and I translate it. I'm my first language is Italian. English is my second language. So when I look at human design, I almost have the same feeling of when I'm translating things from one language to another so that you can understand it. And I love for people to, number one, feel validated in the reading. And actually often people cry during my readings, which I take as a massive, massive compliment and something I'm really proud of because they feel seen. They feel seen sometimes for the first time. They feel validated in their experiences. They feel understood. And that in itself is huge. It's a huge gift. But also what's really important to me, and I think every reader has a different style, I like things to be actionable. So I love for people to leave the reading, yes, having understood more about who they are, but I love for them to leave the call feeling like, okay, I know what steps I can begin to take now to start to embody this information. Because learning about your design is great and it's one thing, but nothing will change in your life just by you learning your design, right? The real change, the real shifts, the real journey is embodying that information. And that's what helps you to start to see real differences. It's almost like reading a book about exercise is one thing, and going and doing the exercise is a completely different thing. And it's in the doing and in the embodying and in the implementation that you see changes. So yeah, I make my readings are full of metaphors and analogies. I have a lot. I have a repertoire that I've built, and I'm always coming up with weird and wonderful metaphors on the calls. It's completely personalized. It's fun. I like to keep it fun and just have a good time with people. And yeah, so far I've had great feedback. So if you'd like a reading, come and reach out.
I thought that it was interesting that you said that people cry because even for me listening to some of your videos, I got emotional a few times because especially as a projector, I think that I think I listen to a lot of people, entrepreneurs that are probably manifestors, generators, manifesting generators in that
Mhm.
realm. And I think to feel seen and validated and heard for the first time in and of itself is very healing. At Blushing Phoenix, when I've had people work with me in one-on-one coaching, I only do single sessions. That's probably part of my projector. Like I don't want to do long, drawn out sessions with people, but I do single sessions. And at the end of the session, it's more of a conversation of understanding where they are on the journey and just truly coaching them where they may be missing something and getting them to look at things a little different or to recommend that they look at things a little different. And at the end of the call, I would say, do you think this call was helpful for you, or did you find value in the call? And every single one of them always says to me, I've worked with therapists, I've worked with this person, I've worked with that person. Something about having a conversation with you who has been through this yourself and is on the other side just makes me feel seen, heard, and validated. And that in and of itself feels like I'm going to walk away as a different person. So I think that human design, what I love about it is that we're not talking about our problems and seeking solutions. We're really learning more. I wrote down what you said of how you use, absorb, and share your energy. And so you're not boxed in, but you can learn so much. And I love too that it's an experiment because even with personality tests, I don't like labels and I don't like clinging to things and saying, well, I do this because of this. So to know that there's so much wiggle room inside of human
Yeah.
design. And a big tagline here at Blushing Phoenix is that we will rise and thrive through transformative action. And so that's a big thing for me and for my audience is that we're willing to do the work. We're willing to do hard things. We're willing to be uncomfortable and we're willing to be super vulnerable for the sake of expansion and consciousness and being able to give to the world and gain from the world all that we're here to give and receive. So, Veronica, thank you so much for spending some time with me. Is there anything in closing, whether it's about blushing or just human design or anything that might be on your heart to share with anybody who's listening? People who listen are usually creative, ambitious, and passionate people who feel held back by some sort of social hindrance and are trying to navigate how they move and are seen in the world. So, any final words for anybody who's listening to this today?
I would say making yourself a priority is always worth it, right? Really prioritizing your happiness is always worth it because so often we get lost in wanting to please and be there for others. And a lot of us are caring and ambitious sometimes to a fault in the sense that we try to meet everyone else's expectations of who they think we should be. And if something doesn't feel right to you, whatever that is, it is worth you taking the time to understand why and to trust that deep down you know that something needs your attention, right? Because sometimes we get that voice or that knowing or that gut feeling or that intuition where it's just something, maybe it's not bad, maybe it's okay, but it could be better. And we ignore it and we just crack on with things and with life. And so my parting comment would be don't ignore it, trust yourself, trust your timing. Maybe it's not now, but it's not ever. Maybe it's just you're not ready to follow down that path. But whenever you are ready, it is well worth it because we deserve to live a life and that is truly magical and happy and where we're thriving and not just surviving.